In part 2 of Limited Resources, Chapter 8, we're going to wind it up here and continue on the conversation about water policy, options and consequences. We talked about how do we create it, what are the components of it. As noted, you might be involved in this. Limited amounts, how are we going to define that? How are we going to stipulate the use of it when we have limited amounts of water? Where are we going to look for new sources for the common good for water? Natural, otherwise? We have to be concerned in here in water markets. Where are they? How do we set the price? How do we get people to use less water? Where do we store water in the event of emergency? How do people get paid for giving some of their water there? Do they get paid? What are some reasonable use requirements of water? In the past, there's been, pretty much use as you will, but in the future, how do we set up reasonable use? How much is appropriate for each use? What are the uses? How do we conserve it? Given this and recognize that there's a lot of people involved, who and how do we determine this? Federal, state, local, community? Strategies we have used in the past to increase supply, of course, is diversion projects and dams. And, we have looked at, as we wind up here, of water allocation. We've had it in dry times where local governments and such have said, hey, no sprinkling the lawns, but we've had loss of irrigation water out in the west, and farmers have lost access to water. Well, the controversial pieces were running water out to the Pacific Ocean and taking care of wildlife, but farmer needs are not being met. How do we do that? How do we do it so it's balanced? Okay. Another one of these aspects of limited resources is energy. And in the past number of years, we have gotten heavily involved in USA becoming self-sufficient. And at the same time, in the self-sufficiency, we've attended to some of the environmental issues of air quality. For example, now we're using up to over 35% of our corn crop goes right to ethanol. A lot of energy is involved in creating that. A lot of economic activity involved. Likewise, we're also involved in our energy policy in agriculture producing biodiesel from soybean crush and animal fats and so on and so forth. We're also trying to meet our energy needs through biogas. That isn't necessarily, without considerations that are counter to what farmers are trying to do. And so in the past, we've used incentives to get it going, to get each of these kinds of industries going, and they slowly get withheld, and that's quite common what we see with government things. Another whole area of limited resource use is our endangered species and biodiversity concerns. That's all policy stuff, all tied to agriculture, natural resources in one way or another. And it's all, of course, immersed because we're losing many species. And quite early on here, and about 50 years ago or so, the Endangered Species Act came into play, and the bald eagle is one of those. And this is brought on by, people are noting the loss of these beautiful birds and what started it. So loss of plant and animals is a big deal. Ecosystems, again, for the common good. What are we doing? And so in that whole process, we started developing a list of endangered species. We're trying to figure out how to preserve the habitat so they regain their numbers. The United States had up to 700 on the list at one time. I'm not sure what it is right now, managed by the Department of the Interior. So just no question, anything that USDA and EPA is involved with affecting farmland conservation chemical is going to have Endangered Species Act considerations. And so as producers, business, and constituents of the common good, we want to be aware that we may want to use our voice there. Well, finally here, the federally, when it comes to this limited resource monitoring regulation, for good reason, the federal usually does defer to the local and state. One, it's politically dangerous, and functionally, it's pretty tough to have federal government out and across the entire country and supporting that. But we do know the feds may be involved for more common policy development because we continue to see lessening and lessening access to fewer and fewer resources on a per capita basis. So we have to ask, do we want them to do it? Do we want to take it in our own hands and monitor these things ourselves? Such is the reason to get educated about it and to become familiar with all the possible partners that we can get involved with. Well, limited resources, farmland, water, endangered species, and energy, and how we deal with that are all things that in agriculture we need to be aware of, because it's not just us. There's a lot of people involved in it. Thank you. We'll catch up later.